The morning sun filters through the stained glass windows of Emmanuel Fellowship Church, casting rich tones of crimson, gold, and sapphire across rows of gleaming mahogany pews. The air is thick with incense, heavy and sweet, curling in slow ribbons beneath the vaulted ceiling. The sanctuary is packed, every seat filled, every eye forward. Silence hums beneath the surface, reverent and expectant. At the pulpit stands Reverend Calvin Marsh. Tall, striking, impeccably dressed in a slate-gray suit. His silver cufflinks gleam under the lights, and his voice, smooth and commanding, carries with practiced ease. "Brothers and sisters," he says, stretching his arms wide. "Today we stand on the edge of God's promise. He is ready to pour out blessings beyond measure. Are you ready to receive?" The room responds in unison, "Amen," rising and falling like a tide. Faith, he continues, is not just prayer. It is action, obedience, sacrifice. You fill this house with your devotion, your tithes, and your trust, and in return, the Lord multiplies it. That is divine law. The choir swells behind him, voices wrapping around the congregation like a warm embrace. Ushers begin to move through the rows with velvet-lined collection plates. People dig into their wallets, their purses, their pockets, each bill offered like a key to heaven. In the front row sits Eleanor Marsh, elegant in a navy silk dress, pearls resting just below her collarbone, posture straight. Her eyes never leave her husband. There's a softness in them. Devotion, certainly, but something else lingers just beneath. Wariness. She holds a leather-bound ledger in her lap, her fingers curling tightly around it, hidden from view. From the back of the sanctuary, a sudden burst of movement breaks the rhythm. The doors swing open. 3 police officers enter, deliberate and grim-faced, walking straight down the center aisle. Murmurs rise. Heads turn. The lead officer's voice cuts through the confusion. "Reverend Calvin Marsh," he says, clear and authoritative, "you are under arrest." The music dies. The choir falls silent. The entire room seems to stop breathing. Eleanor stands, the ledger slipping from her lap. Papers spill across the polished floor. She doesn't move to gather them. Her eyes are locked on Calvin. He doesn't move either. His hand tightens around the microphone. "What is this?" he asks. "There's been some mistake." The officer doesn't respond. He steps forward, takes the microphone gently from Calvin's hand, and motions for him to turn around. Handcuffs click into place. Gasps ripple through the pews. Phones come out. Someone's crying. A woman screams. Eleanor steps into the aisle, shaking her head. "Calvin," she whispers. "What did you do?" Calvin turns to her, face unreadable. For a moment, there's only silence between them. Then he's led away, down the same aisle he's walked 100 times before, only this time. No one dares to meet his eyes. Behind him, the sanctuary remains frozen. Congregants hold their breath, their faith, and their confusion in trembling hands. And Eleanor just stands there, surrounded by scattered pages, alone. 6 months earlier, sunlight poured into the Marsh's grand kitchen like a benediction. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto manicured gardens, and everything from the marble countertops to the crystal fruit bowl gleamed. Eleanor stirred cream into her coffee, watching as Calvin adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. "You look sharp," she said without looking up. Calvin turned, flashing that smile. The one that had convinced a congregation to follow him. The one that had built a brand, an empire, a following. "It's media day," he said, straightening his cuffs. "Gotta look like a man who speaks to God directly." Eleanor smirked into her mug. "And does he return your calls?" "Only on Sundays," he said. They both laughed. For a moment, it felt easy. Later that morning, the church lobby buzzed with lights, cameras, and a well-rehearsed production crew. The Marshes stood in front of a backdrop emblazoned with Emmanuel Fellowship's logo, a golden cross over a field of wheat. The photographer gave directions closer together. Eleanor, hand on his chest. "Yes, that's it. Smile." And Calvin played his role to perfection. A strong hand on his wife's back, a warm gaze tilted just so. Eleanor's expression was practiced, too, though her smile wavered once or twice. Only someone very close would have noticed. The resulting photo was splashed across the next month's newsletter. Shepherds of the City, the headline read, "The power couple bringing souls and dollars back to Christ." To the public, they were flawless. To the congregation, they were holy. But at home, tiny cracks were forming. At dinner, Calvin was distracted. His phone buzzed constantly. He took most calls in his study behind closed doors. Eleanor tried not to let it bother her. She focused on church outreach, charity drives, meal trains for widows and new mothers. She buried herself in service. But one night, while organizing donation receipts for the Women's Shelter Project, she noticed something strange. A wire transfer of $40,000 had been routed through a consulting firm she didn't recognize. She flagged it with a sticky note and set it aside. The next morning, it was gone. "Calvin," she asked over breakfast, "do you know anything about a firm called Sable and Crane?" He barely looked up from his tablet. "That's a contractor for the South Campus expansion." "Why?" "I couldn't find them on any invoices." He gave a dismissive wave. "They're subcontracted. You don't need to worry about the admin stuff. Focus on your work with the youth girls. Keep doing what you do best." It was said kindly, warmly, but it stung. That night, after he fell asleep, she slipped into his office. The drawers were locked. The filing cabinet, too. A combination safe she'd never seen before sat at the bottom of the bookshelf, disguised behind stacked devotionals and sermon notebooks. She didn't know the code, but she knew something was wrong. The next day, she called a friend, someone from her college days who now worked in accounting. She didn't say much, just that she needed help understanding some records, just in case. The next week, Calvin announced a new campaign to the congregation, Project Ascension, a multi-million-dollar initiative to build satellite churches across the state. There were slides, renderings, excited applause. And in the front row, Eleanor clapped along with everyone else. Smile in place. Eyes trained on her husband, but her heart beat hard and fast. She was beginning to understand. The sermons, the showmanship, the sleek branding, the retreats to Monaco and Dubai masked as global outreach. It wasn't just faith Calvin was selling. It was an illusion, and she had just started peeling it back. The church was thriving. Membership was up. Donations were flowing in faster than ever. Calvin was hosting live streams with celebrity pastors, boasting about building God's economy. And Eleanor? Eleanor was drowning in smiles she didn't trust anymore. At every event, she stood beside him like the model first lady of faith. The ushers adored her. The choir girls mimicked her hair. The older women called her graceful and strong, like she was the quiet power behind her husband's throne. And maybe she was. Or maybe she had been. But now, the whispers in her chest wouldn't stop. She started spending her evenings in the church office under the pretense of organizing volunteer schedules. When everyone went home, she'd stay. She'd wait for the building to empty, then let herself into Calvin's administrative suite with a copied key she'd quietly made 2 weeks earlier. His office smelled like his cologne, amber and cedarwood, and the weight of control. Everything was arranged with obsessive precision. No clutter, no loose papers. But the digital trail wasn't as tidy. She accessed his computer using his birth year as the passcode. It was laughably simple. Inside, she found folders labeled innocently enough: sermons, finances, growth models. She opened each one, expecting scripture quotes and donation reports. Instead, she found spreadsheets, dozens of them, complex routing details, church donations moving through LLCs, trust accounts, shell corporations tied to offshore banks. Her pulse quickened. There was one line item that came up again and again: Ascension Initiative Phase 2. She printed what she could, slipping pages into a manila folder. On her way out, she deleted the access logs. Calvin could never know. The next morning, they had breakfast like nothing was wrong. "Big week coming up," he said, sipping his espresso. "That interview with Divine Vision is on Thursday. Think we should fly the producer in first class?" Eleanor nodded, adding strawberries to her yogurt. He glanced up. "You've been quiet lately." "I've just been tired," she said. The women's conference was a lot. He leaned over, kissed her temple. You're my rock, Elle. I couldn't do this without you. She didn't flinch, but she didn't smile either. By the end of the week, her accountant friend called her back. These transfers don't make sense, he said over the phone, voice low and cautious. Some of these LLCs aren't real businesses. They're shells. And whoever set this up, they knew exactly how to hide it. Eleanor said nothing. She was standing in the prayer garden behind the sanctuary, watching a group of children play tag between the benches. I need everything you can get, her friend added. This is more than shady. This could be criminal. She hung up and felt her knees wobble. At home that night, she tried to confront Calvin gently. Cal, I've been looking at some of the donation routing. Just for the women's fund. There's money missing. I thought maybe there was a reporting error. He didn't look up from his tablet. Eleanor, he said, carefully, don't do this. Her stomach twisted. Do what? He set the tablet down and turned to her. You're not an accountant. You're not on the finance committee. The church's money is the church's business. She blinked. I thought we were the church. A long silence stretched between them. Calvin stood, slowly. We're a movement, he said. You want to talk about missing money? Think about how many people we've saved. How many lives we've changed. You want to question that? Over a few digits on a spreadsheet. His voice never rose, but it turned cold. Hard. Final. Eleanor didn't push again that night. But the doubt had taken root. And it wasn't going away. The storm broke in the middle of the night. Not outside. The sky was clear, stars sharp as glass. But inside Eleanor Marsh's heart, the storm had already begun. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rise and fall of Calvin's breathing beside her. He slept peacefully. She hadn't, not in weeks. Beside the bed, the manila folder rested beneath a stack of devotionals. She had copied what she could, but there were still questions, still gaps. And Calvin's locked safe, hidden behind his sermon library, was the last place she hadn't looked. That night, she made a decision. When Calvin left for a men's leadership retreat the following morning, Eleanor waited exactly 37 minutes after his car pulled out of the driveway. Then she went straight to his office. No choir music playing, no footsteps in the hall, just silence and that ever-present scent of cedar and cologne. She pulled the devotionals from the shelf, revealing the matte black combination safe embedded in the wall. The keypad blinked softly. She stared at it. Her hands didn't tremble. She entered the code, 1019. Their anniversary. Nothing. She tried again. 1983, his birth year. Still locked. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and whispered under her breath. Try the idol first. Then she typed 7777. A soft click. The safe opened. Inside, cash. Bundles of it. Bound tightly with red rubber bands. Marked in currencies she didn't immediately recognize. Swiss francs. Euros. US hundreds, stacked like bricks. Beneath the cash were 2 ledger books, older than the others, their covers worn. She flipped through them and felt her stomach drop. They weren't donation logs. They were investor memos, private buy-ins, coded entries, payout schedules, each one tied to a donor, or rather, a partner. Anonymous, numbered, some foreign. Most notes marked Ascension in bold. And in the back, tucked into the last page, was a photograph. It was Calvin, smiling, clinking glasses with 2 men she didn't recognize on a yacht. Monaco. She could tell by the port behind them. She had been there with him, once, before the church called it a mission trip. One of the men was smoking a cigar, and another wore a shirt with the logo of a high-profile cryptocurrency firm that had gone bankrupt under fraud investigations. Behind the photograph, folded in quarters, was a contract. Ascension Initiative, Expansion Strategy Phase 2. Projected revenue, $37.5 million over 5 years. Underwritten by private capital. Leveraged against Emmanuel Fellowship Church Holdings. Primary contact, C. Marsh. Eleanor sat down on the edge of the office chair and read it again. And again. until the edges of her vision started to blur. This wasn't just creative fundraising. Calvin had turned their church, their ministry, into a front. He wasn't just skimming. He was laundering, feeding off the faith of widows, single mothers, young couples who skipped groceries to tithe. Their sacrifice had become his currency. She closed the safe and reshelved the devotionals, careful not to disturb anything. She placed the photo and a copy of the contract into her folder and walked out of the office as calmly as she'd entered. But when she stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, she staggered. The air felt heavier, her legs unsure. The world had tilted. That night, she sat alone at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, the folder resting in her lap. And she knew she would give him a chance to tell the truth, to explain himself. Maybe he'd beg. Maybe he'd blame someone else. Maybe there'd be redemption, somehow. But if he didn't, she'd already dialed the number of an investigative journalist. Just in case. The weekend retreat was supposed to last 3 days. Calvin came back after one. He walked through the front door earlier than expected, carrying a duffel bag and wearing a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Eleanor was in the kitchen, pretending to read a cookbook she'd already flipped through twice. "You're back early," she said, not looking up. He dropped the bag. "Things wrapped sooner than I thought." She turned a page. "You didn't mention that in your last message." He didn't respond right away. She could feel him watching her. "How was it?" she asked, closing the book. Calvin walked to the sink and poured himself a glass of water. Productive. Reflective. The silence between them stretched too long. Then, "Eleanor." She braced herself. "Were you in my office?" She blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Her voice was steady. "Why would I be in your office?" Calvin stared at her for a long moment. "Some things were moved." "You think I broke into your safe?" She gave a dry laugh. "That's a stretch." "Don't insult me," he snapped. "You think I don't know when someone's been tampering with my business?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. "Your business." His jaw clenched. Too late to walk it back now. She stood up, took the manila folder off the counter, and dropped it on the table between them. "I know what you're doing, Calvin." He didn't move. "I know about Sable and Crane. I know about the offshore accounts. I saw the safe, the contracts, the photo." He said nothing. "I gave you a chance," she said, voice trembling now, "to come clean. I didn't want this. But I won't be a part of this anymore. I'm leaving. And I'm taking this to someone who can stop you." Still, no movement. Only his eyes, dark, calculating. Quiet as a gunshot waiting to fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "You're not taking anything." She reached for her phone, already dialing. He moved fast. Too fast. The glass he'd been holding shattered against the floor as he lunged across the table, grabbing her wrist. The phone clattered to the ground. She screamed short, sharp, but it was muffled by his hand. "I built this," he hissed. "I gave you everything. And you want to burn it down?" She struggled, shoved him hard with both hands. He stumbled back, tripping on the broken glass, cutting his palm. He didn't notice. His eyes were wild now. "This isn't about you," she said, breath ragged. "It's about the people who trusted you." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Trusted me? They need me. They believe in me because I give them purpose. You think anyone cares what I do with the money?" He moved again, this time slower. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. But something in his tone said he already had. She backed away, toward the stairs. "Don't make this worse," he said. "You already did." They stared at each other, wife and husband, shepherd and witness, hunter and prey. The moment split open. Then she turned and ran. He followed. The house was cathedral quiet, save for the sound of Eleanor's bare feet against the staircase and Calvin's heavy steps closing the distance behind her. She made it to the bedroom and slammed the door shut, fumbling for the lock. Her fingers shook. It clicked into place just as the doorknob twisted violently. Then again, and again. "Eleanor," he called from the other side, calmer now, which somehow made it worse. "Come on. Let's just talk. Please." She backed away, her hand diving into the drawer of her vanity. Lipsticks, receipts, and finally, yes, a flash drive. All the files she'd copied from his office, the photos, the spreadsheets. She clutched it like it could save her life. Downstairs, the landline rang. Then it stopped. He'd unplugged it. The banging started again, this time harder. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and locked herself in the closet. Her voice was a whisper as she dialed. 911. What's your emergency? My husband is trying to hurt me. He's a public figure. His name is... The line cut. She looked at the screen. No signal. Of course. The house's walls were thick, and Calvin had always insisted on metal mesh insulation. He said it was for energy efficiency. She realized now, with a sick twist in her stomach, it blocked signals too. Footsteps moved away from the door. Silence. Then, a new sound. The familiar whirring of the generator in the basement. The backup system. He'd killed the power. Everything went dark. She stayed curled in the closet, barely breathing. Then the crash. With splintering. The bedroom door was no longer a barrier. She opened the closet door slowly, creeping out, holding a heavy glass perfume bottle in one hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. The hallway light flickered. The air was thick. No Calvin in sight. She moved fast. Down the hall. Toward the back stairs. She nearly made it. But he was there, waiting in the dark. His silhouette backlit by the glow of emergency lights from the hallway sconces. "Eleanor," he said again, voice low. "You're making this ugly." "You already made it evil," she said, and threw the perfume bottle. It shattered against the wall, hands around her throat. Only her nails clawing at his wrists. Only the look in his eyes, not rage. Not hate. Just cold, terrifying resolve. When she stopped struggling, he let go. He stood over her, breath heaving, blood from his palm dripping onto the floor beside her still body. And then the sound hit him. A sharp beep. The home security backup system rebooting. The cameras, recording again. He froze. Looked up. Red lights blinking. He moved quickly now, dragging her body out of frame, turning off the feed manually from the wall panel. Wiping surfaces. Gathering papers. Searching her pockets. He found the flash drive and smashed it under his shoe. Then he sat in the dark for a long time. Alone. He'd always said God spoke to him in moments like these. But now, there was only silence. The official statement came 3 days later. Eleanor Marsh, beloved wife of Pastor Calvin Marsh, passed away suddenly from what appears to be a medical emergency at the couple's home. She was a light to the congregation, a guiding voice to so many. Her absence will be deeply felt. We ask for privacy during this time of unimaginable grief. There were flowers at the church gate for weeks, candlelight vigils, Facebook tributes, tearful testimonials from congregants who swore she had changed their lives. Calvin delivered the eulogy himself. He stood beneath the golden cross, the sanctuary bathed in soft white light, and spoke in a low, trembling voice about loss, about destiny, about God's mysterious will. "She was my heart," he said, "and now she's gone." The congregation wept. Not one of them noticed the scratch on his wrist. Not one of them questioned the sealed casket. The police had come, of course. A formal investigation. A medical examiner's report. A death certificate signed under pressure, citing cardiac arrest. No forced entry. No sign of a struggle. The house was immaculate. Just as he'd planned. But grief, even staged, is a performance with a ticking clock. And time has a way of peeling back facades. Because there was one thing Calvin hadn't counted on. The cloud backup. The flash drive had been destroyed. But Eleanor had also emailed files to herself. And to someone else. 3 weeks after the funeral, an investigative report aired on a regional news station. It was quiet at first, a whisper among journalists, an anonymous tip about financial irregularities tied to Emmanuel Fellowship's expansion fund. Then the documents started leaking. Donation trails, shell companies, the photo on the yacht, and finally, the coroner's second opinion. A private examiner hired by Eleanor's brother. The bruising on her neck, the fingernail marks, the broken capillaries. Sudden cardiac arrest didn't leave those. By the time police returned to the Marsh estate, Calvin was gone. Vanished. His accounts frozen. His car abandoned at a private airstrip outside the city. No known flight records. No passport activity. Just an empty hangar. And a single note typed on church letterhead, left behind on his desk. God will sort the righteous from the wicked. I fear neither man nor prison. I answer to a higher judge. As the authorities hunted for him, the congregation splintered. Some stood by him. Others called for justice. Eleanor's name became something more than a headline. It became a symbol, not just of a woman silenced, but of a system exploited, a faith betrayed. And in the quiet corners of the internet, people still trade theories. Where is Calvin Marsh? Did he bribe his way into another country? Was he helped by one of his followers? Or did he vanish into the same darkness he once claimed to save others from? One thing is certain. He ran from justice, but not from judgment. Because Eleanor's voice didn't die with her. It just changed form. And now it speaks in headlines, in hushed conversations, in the growing swell of truth. And it's not done speaking yet. Calvin Marsh built an empire on sermons and secrets. He stood in the pulpit as a shepherd, while behind closed doors, he played the wolf. And like so many predators cloaked in faith, he counted on silence, on loyalty, on fear. But what he didn't count on, what men like him never count on, is a woman like Eleanor. She saw through the performance. She asked the questions no one else dared. And when the truth put her life in danger, she didn't back down. She documented everything. She planned. And even in death, she exposed him. This isn't just a story about corruption. It's about power and how far someone will go to protect it. It's about the people who suffer in silence while institutions protect their own. And it's a warning. If someone tells you to stop asking questions in the name of faith, that's not faith. That's control. If this story moved you, don't let Eleanor's voice be the last word. Share this video. Post it. Talk about it. Because real-life versions of this are happening in churches, businesses, and homes around the world right now. And if you or someone you know suspects abuse of power, financial exploitation, or spiritual manipulation, say something. Don't wait for permission. Be the voice. Be the evidence. Be the one who doesn't stay quiet. Subscribe for more stories that peel back the curtain, because truth doesn't whisper. It roars.